Hi there, sport fans. This is Johnny Most reporting for the Boston Celtics. Well, let's just relax and watch that seventh game.
With the ball here, plays one of the greatest games in a brilliant career.
Blocked by Russell. Blocked by Russell. What a play by Bill Russell.
In sports, there's always those endless discussions about who's the best ever, comparing players or teams from different eras, even though it often doesn't make much sense. But for a long time, there wasn't much debate about sports' greatest dynasty. The Celtics teams from the 50s and 60s were the one. To me, time has blurred things a bit. It's been 54 years since Russell and company last exited the court after all. These days, some people mention the Chicago Bulls or the New England Patriots in football on top of their rankings. But to me, it comes down to one number, or two actually. 11 championships in 13 years. The Bulls, the Patriots, baseball, New York Yankees, the Canadians in hockey, even Real Madrid in soccer. No team ever came close to that number. I've been a basketball fan for more than 3 decades, and covered it full-time as a reporter for 10. To me, those Celtics were always there in the background. Like the picture of a great-grandfather people told you was one of a kind but you never met. I couldn't connect with them because of the grainy footage and the moves feeling a bit mechanical. Also the fact that the NBA only had 8 teams back then made it look like the competition was nowhere near as tough as today, with 30 teams in the league now. And lastly, to a lot of people, including me, Boston was never the place that sounded cool like Chicago, Los Angeles, or New York. Quite the opposite, actually. But recently I tried to learn more about it. I realized that although many great books have come out on that odyssey, I couldn't really find a documentary or a podcast that really grasped what these teams were about. So I took a shot at it, talking to former Celtics from that era, researching books, news stories. What I see now is not a still photograph, but a high-octane team that may have played the fastest pace ever seen in the NBA to this day. A style that, on top of everything else, won games and championships. I also see a collection of standout personalities and egos that willingly became pieces of a puzzle. Possibly the most efficient sports collective of all time, something that would be almost impossible to replicate today. As very few of the players from that era are still alive, I figured this was one of the last opportunities for them to tell that story orally, in a way that maybe could entertain a large audience. So for that, let's go back to 1946, and Boston, of all places.
This is the place, and the fact that it all occurred in Boston is sort of interesting because this is not a basketball town. It's a hockey town. That's
Richard Johnson, who's been curator at the Sports Museum in Boston for more than 40 years.
There was a period of time in Boston, for about maybe 20, 25 years, when high school basketball itself was not contested in the city. Yes, there were great teams from Somerville and Cambridge and surrounding towns, but the city of Boston itself was sort of devoid of basketball. And all of a sudden, we have this professional team that in the beginning had to go so far as scheduling double headers with high school teams like Somerville High School to attract fans.
In 1946, Boston's team was the Bruins, the first ever American pro hockey team to join the National Hockey League in 1924.
The Celtics, while not an afterthought, were basically created to fill the dates that were open.
Back then, the arena's general manager was a man named Walter Brown, who had inherited the position from his father, as well as management of another venue where the Celtics would end up playing in 1955, the Boston Garden.
Without a doubt, Walter Brown was the greatest sportsman in Boston's long history. his contribution to basketball is one where it was a natural extension of what he did for both the arena in general as well as the sport of ice hockey. There was a period of time, roughly 14 years, where he was not only the owner and chief executive of the Boston Celtics, but he was the president of the Boston Bruins National Hockey League team, and remains the only person ever inducted in the halls of fame of both hockey and basketball. Which, if you think of it, that's pretty impressive.
Also managing the Bruins since 1939 and the passing of his father, George, Brown wanted to add dates to his venues, and in 1945 contacted several owners and managers of other arenas in the country about forming a basketball league. Save for traveling teams like the Harlem Globetrotters, the Harlem Wrens, or the original Celtics who were actually from New York, professional basketball had never been successful prior to that, even though the sport was invented in the US back in 1891. On June 9, 1946, the Basketball Association of America was born, later to be renamed the National Basketball Association. The Boston Celtics were one of 11 original teams. Fast forward 10 years, and the Celtics were yet to make it to the finals. The team had 3 All-Stars and the best point guard in the game, Bob Cousy. An exciting style, but their defense was below average and they lacked rebounding to feed their fast break offense. With the talent we've got in this ball club, if we can just come up with one big man to get us the ball, we'll win everything in sight, the Celtics coach Red Auerbach told the Boston Globe after yet another loss in the playoffs, this time to Syracuse, in March of 1956.
Yeah, we already had a good team. We had 8 Hall of Famers on that team, so we weren't chopped liver, but we would have never. Our center was Ed McCauley, who was 6'9", and he weighed, you see him coming out of the shower, you took him for a good meal. So he wasn't gonna. We needed rebounding. Outback wanted transition, and in order to have transition, you had to have control your boards. McCauley never had a shot.
Is the legendary Bob Cousy, whom we had the chance to interview at his place in Worcester in the spring of 2023. Auerbach had been looking for that missing piece for years. Back in 1954, his former college coach Bill Reinhardt had tipped him about Bill Russell, the sophomore center from the University of San Francisco. So Auerbach kept checking on him through coaches in France. Fred Scolari, one of his former players in Washington, once called, "Red, he can't shoot to save his life, but he's the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life on a basketball court," as Auerbach recounted in his autobiography. Pretty inarticulate offensively, Russell was nevertheless a rare combination for that era. A 6'10" frame with the quickness of a guard that could alter the course of a game with his defense. Like Bob Cox, the 6'5" center from one of USF's California rivals, Loyola, recounted in one day. "Early in the game, I was in the key, I faked right, and saw his end. Then left, and the end was there again. So I faked right, and then went left, and shot, clear. The ball came whistling back past, like walking off the court." Russell also competed in track and field, where he was second in the nation in high jump in 1956, behind eventual Olympic champion Charles Dumas. He had a personal best of 6 feet and 9.25 inches, still a record at USF, while facing the bar and using the old straddle technique, not the Fosbury flop that only came in 1968. University of California coach Pete Newell, another Auerbach acquaintance, lauded his rebounding.
I remember Auerbach coming to me and saying, "Bill said, this Russell, if we can get him next year, he'll solve all our problems."
Auerbach had set his mind. He wanted Russell. But there were several obstacles in the way. First, Russell didn't want to play for Boston, but for Minneapolis, alongside NBA's first dominating center, George Mikan. A few years back, Russell had attended the Lakers exhibition game. Someone had offered him to meet the players afterward, but the teenagers didn't want to go near professional athletes. His prior experience was with minor league baseball players, who according to him had called him and his friends the N-word and spit tobacco at them. So Russell stayed outside the lockers.
And so while I was waiting, George Mikan comes out. He sees me and he walks over me. "How you doing, big fella?" Well, that was a real joke. Michael was 6'10", 280, and I was 6'7", 100. And he says, "How you doing, big brother?" He said, "You play center?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well," he showed me a couple of moves that he used. I said, "Now listen, when you get out of college, you got to come play for the Lakers."
That's how Russell recounted vividly his first encounter with Mike during an interview with Taylor Branch for the Civil Rights History Project in 2013. But Mike, plagued by injuries and already busy with his own law practice, had just retired and was running for Congress. Then Russell heard about Auerbach. He gathered his own intel on the coach and changed his mind. Another hurdle was Ab Saperstein, founder and owner of the Harlem Globetrotters, who offered Russell $50,000 to skip the Olympics after graduation and join the traveling team. But the two-time college national champion was rebuffed by his meeting with Saperstein, who only addressed his USF coach, Phil Wolpert, and not him directly, as he recalled in his autobiography, Go Up for Glory.
If I'm not smart enough to talk to, then I'm not smart enough to play for him.
Also, Russell had set his sight on the 1956 Melbourne Olympics, which were to be played from late November to early December. So he turned down the Trotters. In Melbourne, the US national team breezed through the Olympics tournament and got the gold, winning by an average of 53 points per game. Another problem was that the Celtics had forfeited their first-round pick by using it for what was then called the territorial drafts. At that time, college basketball was much more popular than the pro game. So the owners had decided to let franchises select first a player from a nearby university to draw crowds. That's what Boston did in 1956, selecting Holy Cross forward Tom Heinsohn, forfeiting their first-round draft pick in the process. So to get Russell, the Celtics would have to get a high pick from another team. Bent on skipping the Rochester Royals, which were to pick first, Russell asked Lester Harrison, the owner, for $25,000 annual salary, which was the same as Cousy, the highest paid player in the league, knowing that he would turn it down, which he did. But Auerbach wanted to take no chances. So he had Walter Brown promise Lester Harrison that the Ice Capades, a hugely popular ice skating show in which Brown had a stake, would stop in Rochester on their tour. That sealed the deal. The St. Louis Hawks had the second pick. Auerbach arranged to trade Ed Macaulay and another player, Cliff Hagan, to the Hawks. And on April 30th, 1956, Bill Russell officially became a Celtic.
The big people when I played were like Frankenstein monsters. Bum, bum, bum. Even Mike, who gets so much attention, he was fine because he got up and down the floor a little easier. And then if you put him, it was before the expanded lane, they put him inside, and wow, he was built so he had a good, nice little hook right and left. But he, in view of today's centers, the Jabars or whoever, so Russell came along, and he was just a track and field athlete.
Yes.
You know, he was an athlete who had all these other wonderful skills. I mean, he could shoot very well. He didn't dribble that well, although he didn't lose it. But athletically, he did things no one, and he had such an advantage over the big men he played against. Even today, he would be very functional and effective, I think. And as I say,
Russell is the sole player to have been part of every one of those 11 championship teams in 13 years, getting the last 2 rings while he was both coaching the Celtics and playing. Russ, as he was often called, did average 15 points a game, so he was a factor on offense. But to his former teammates Tom Heinsohn, who compared him to French master painter Cézanne, in his autobiography Give Him the Hook, quote, "He never had to score a single point to be the most dominating player in the history of the game," end quote. To Heinsohn, both Russell and the French artist invented a new school of thought. Quote, "Cézanne did it with geometric forms, Russell did it with timing, with great leaping ability with block shots, and like Cousy, with a particular delight in the psychology of it all."
You must play the best kind of basketball possible. In my case, that was defense.
Wrote Russell in Go Up for Glory.
Auerbach told me at the start not to think about shooting. Your game is set to get me the ball. You get the ball and throw it up there for the shooters. We'll count rebounds as baskets for you. Russell added a new word to the NBA vocabulary.
Once said legendary Celtics announcer Johnny Most.
The word is rejection. A rejection so devastating that it affected the entire offensive effort and style of opponents.
Here's Most calling Game 7 of the 1966 NBA Finals between the Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers.
We've seen it all here tonight. Tough defense. Great offensive plays. The pass to Ellis. Back to West. He's bottled up out to Baylor, driving the lane. He lays it up. Is blocked by Russell. Blocked by Russell. What a play by Bill Russell.
During the 2013 interview with Taylor Branch, Russell reflected on his play and his contribution to the game.
Basketball was taught differently then. I mean, some of the things that people now wouldn't be familiar with is that you weren't supposed to leave your feet. And no good defensive player ever leaves his feet. Right. Well, basically what I was doing, in retrospect, was bringing the vertical game to a game that had been horizontal. And this is an altogether new element. Seeing high jump, which I participated in track and field, I can jump over my head. Well, in basketball in the gym, we should do an exercise where we take chalk and put it on your finger and run, jump as high and put a chalk mark. Well, I can put a chalk mark 13 feet above the floor, which is the top of the backboard.
Russ, as he was often called, was not only a great athlete, but a great thinker, elevating defense to an art, a mastermind.
Since there was a time before I tried to consciously stop doing it, I remembered every play of every game I ever played. And I did that for scouting purposes, so that if I play this guy again, I know exactly what he does. See, because my defense was not reaction. It was action.
The NBA has had some great defensive players over the years. Even today, in a league that's all about offense. Hakeem Olajuwon, Ben Wallace, Dikembe Mutombo, or Draymond Green more recently, all had an impact way beyond guarding a player. But no one defined the team's overall game from the defensive end like Russell did. For him and Auerbach, protecting the rim was not just about denying a basket. It was also about instantly transitioning to offense in a flawless way. And with Russ harvesting rebounds like no one before him, the Celtics offense became unstoppable. The 11 podcast is produced, written, narrated and edited by me, Thomas Urban. Sound designed by Bruno Urban. Thanks to all the Celtics voices that agreed to talk. Additional voices by Ross Ferguson and Jeremy Urban. If you like the show, please leave a review.